I mentioned a nobleman, says here Archibald 11th Earl of Eglinton in a footnote, who I believe was really uneasy if his company would not drink hard. Johnson said, that is from having had people about him who he has been accustomed to command. I said, supposing I should be tete-a-tete with him at table. Johnson said, sir, there is no more reason for your drinking with him than his being sober with you. I said, why, that is true, for it would do him less hurt to be sober than it would do me to get drunk. Johnson said, yes, sir. And for what I have heard of him, one would not wish to sacrifice himself to such a man. If he must always have somebody to drink with him, he should buy a slave, and then he would be sure to have it. They who submit to drink as another pleases make themselves his slaves. I said, but, sir, you will surely make allowance for the duty of hospitality. A gentleman who loves drinking comes to visit me. Johnson said, sir, a man knows whom he visits. He comes to the table. Of a sober man. I said, but, sir, you and I should not have been so well received in the Highlands and Hebrides if I had not drunk with our worthy friends. Had I drank water only as you did, they would not have been so cordial. Johnson answered, Sir William Temple mentions that in his travels through the Netherlands he had 2 or 3 gentlemen with him, and when a bumper was necessary, he put it on them. Were I to travel again through the islands, I would have Sir Joshua with me to take the bumpers. I said, but sir, let me put a case. Suppose Sir Joshua should take a jaunt into Scotland. He does me the honor to pay me a visit at my house in the country. I am overjoyed this seeing him. We are quite by ourselves. Shall I unsociably and churlishly let him sit drinking by himself? No, no, my dear Sir Joshua, you shall not be treated so. I will take a bottle with you. The celebrated Mrs. Rudd being mentioned, Johnson said, 15 years ago I should have gone to see her. Spottiswoode said, because she was 15 years younger? Johnson said, no, sir, but now they have a trick of putting everything into the newspapers. He begged of General Pioli to repeat one of the introductory stanzas of the first book of Tasso's Jerusalem, which he did, and then Johnson found fault with the simile of sweetening the edges of the cup for a child, being transferred from Lucretius into an epic poem. The journal said he did not imagine Homer's poetry was so ancient as it is supposed, because he ascribes to a Greek colony circumstances of refinement not found in Greece itself at a later period, when Thucydides wrote. Thucydides? Thucydides. Johnson answered, I recollect but one passage quoted by Thucydides about Homer, which is not to be found in our copies of Homer's work. I am for the antiquity of Homer, and think that a Grecian colony, by being nearer Persia, might be more refined than the mother country. On Wednesday, April 29th, I dined with Johnson at Mr. Allan Ramsay's, where were Lord Binning, Dr. Robinson, the historian, Sir Joshua Reynolds, and the Honorable Mrs. Bockawen, widow of the Admiral, and mother of the present Viscount Falmouth, of whom, if it be not presumptuous in me to praise her, I would say that her manners are the most agreeable and her conversation the best of any lady with whom I have ever in the happiness to be acquainted. I guess even his wife. Before Johnson came, we talked a good deal of him. Ramsay said he had always found him a very polite man, and that he treated him with great respect, which he did very sincerely. I said I worshipped him. Robertson said, but some of you spoil him. You should not worship him. You should worship no man. I said, I cannot help worshipping him. He is so much superior to other men. Robertson said, in criticism and in wit and conversation, he is no doubt very excellent, but in other respects he is not above other men. he will believe anything and will strenuously defend the most minute circumstances connected with the Church of England. I said, "Believe me, doctor, you are much mistaken as to this, for when you talk with him calmly in private, he is very liberal in his way of thinking." Robertson said, "He and I have been always very gracious. The first time I met him was one evening at Strahan's, when he had just had an unlucky altercation with Adam Smith, to whom he had been so rough that Strahan, after Smith was gone, had remonstrated with him and told him that I was coming soon, and that he was uneasy to think that he might behave in the same manner to me." No, sir," said Johnson. "I warrant you Robinson and I shall do very well." Accordingly, he was gentle and good-humored and courteous with me the whole evening, and he has been so upon every occasion that we have met since. I have often said, that I have been in a great measure indebted to Smith for my good reception. I said, "His power of reasoning is very strong, and he has a peculiar art of drawing characters, which is as rare as good portrait painting." Sir Joshua Reynolds, the drunk, no, it doesn't say that, but he was drunk last time, wasn't he? Said, "He is undoubtedly admirable in this, but in order to mark the characters which he draws, he overcharges them and gives people more than they really have, whether of good or bad." No sooner did he, of whom we had been thus talking so easily, arrive than we were all as quiet as a school upon the entrance of the headmaster, and were very soon set down to a table covered with some such variety of good things as contributed not a little to dispose him to be pleased. Which means he was eating quite a lot, I guess. Ramsay said, "I am old enough to have been a contemporary of Pope. His poetry was highly admired in his lifetime, more a great deal than after his death." Johnson said to this, "Sir, it has not been less admired since his death. No author ever has had so much fame in their own lifetime as Pope and Voltaire, and Pope's poetry has been as much admired since his death as during his life. It has only not been as much talked of, but that is owing to it being now more distant, and people having other writing to talk of. Virgil is less talked of than Pope, and Homer is less talked of than Virgil, but they are not less admired. We must read what the world reads at the moment. It has been maintained that this superfotation, word I've never seen before. Let me spell it out for you. superfoetation. This teeming of the press in modern times is prejudicial to good literature because it obliges us to read so much of what is of inferior value in order to be in the fashion. Sounds like today. So that better works are neglected for want of time, because a man will have more gratification of his vanity in conversation from having read modern books than from having read the best works of antiquity. But it must be considered that we have now more knowledge generally diffused. All our ladies read now, which is a great extension. I don't remember him saying that last time. Modern writers are the moons of literature. They shine with reflected light, with light borrowed from the ancients. Greece appears to me to be the fountain of knowledge, Rome of elegance. He hasn't been to Rome back then. Ramsay said, "I suppose Homer's Iliad to be a collection of pieces which had been written before his time. I should like to see a translation of it in poetical prose like the Book of Ruth or Job." Robertson said, "Would you, Dr. Johnson, who are master of the English language, but try your hand upon a part of it?" Johnson answered, "Sir, you could not read it without the pleasure of verse." Footnote here from Boswell. This experiment, which Madame Dacier made in vain, has since been tried in our own language by the editor of Ossian, and we must either think very meanly of his abilities or allow that Dr. Johnson was in the right. And Mr. Cowper, a man of real genius, has miserably failed in his blank verse translation. We talked of antiquarian researches. Johnson said, "All that is really known of the ancient state of Britain is contained in a few pages. We can know no more than what the old writers have told us. Yet what large books have we upon it, the whole of which, excepting such parts as are taken from those old writers, is all a dream, such as Whitaker's Manchester. I have heard Henry's History of Britain well spoken of. I am told it is carried on separate divisions as the civil, the military, the religious history. I wish much to have one branch well done, and that is the history of manners, of common life. Robertson said, Henry should have applied his attention to that alone, which is enough for any man. And he might have found a great deal scattered in various books had he read solely with that view. Henry erred in not selling his first volume at a moderate price to the booksellers, that they might have pushed him till he had got reputation. I sold my History of Scotland at a moderate price, as a work by which the booksellers might either gain or not. And Cattle has told me that Miller and he had got £6,000 by it. I afterward received a much higher price for my writings. An author should sell his first work, for what the booksellers will give, till it shall appear whether he is an author of merit, or, which is the same thing, as to purchase money, an author who pleases the public. Dr. Robertson expatiated on the character of a certain nobleman, says your Lord Clive, that he was one of the strongest-minded men that ever lived, that he would sit in company quite sluggish, while there was nothing to call forth his intellectual vigor, but the moment that any important subject was started, for instance, how this country is to be defended against a French invasion, he would rouse himself and show his extraordinary talents with the most powerful ability and imagination. Or animation, rather. Johnson said, Yet this man cut his own throat. The true, strong, and sound mind is the mind that can embrace equally great things and small. Now I am told that King of Prussia will say to a servant, Bring me a bottle of such a wine which came in such a year. It lies in such a corner of the cellars. I would have a man great in great things, and elegant in little things. He said to me afterwards, when we were by ourselves, Robinson was a mighty romantic humor. He talked of one whom he did not know, but I downed him with the King of Prussia. Yes, sir, said I. You threw a bottle at his head. An ingenious gentleman was mentioned. It says here in a footnote, this is Robert Adams, concerning whom both Robertson and Ramsay agreed that he had a constant firmness of mind. For after a laborious day, and amidst a multiplicity of cares and anxieties, he would sit down with his sister and be quite cheerful and good-humored. Such a disposition, it was observed, was a happy gift of nature. Johnson said, I do not think so. A man has from nature a certain portion of mind. The use he makes of it depends upon his own free will. That a man has always the same firmness of mind I do not say, because every man feels his mind less firm at one time than at another. But I think a man's being in a good or bad humor depends upon his will. I, however, could not help thinking that a man's humor is often uncontrollable by his will. Johnson harangued against drinking wine again. A man, said he, may choose whether he will have abstemiousness and knowledge, or claret and ignorance. Dr. Robertson, who is very compassionable, was beginning to dissent as to the prescription of claret. Johnson, with a placid smile, said, Nay, sir, you shall not differ with me, as I have said that the man is most perfect who takes in the most things. I am for knowledge in claret. Robertson, holding a glass of generous claret in his hand, said, Sir, I can only drink your health. And Johnson said, Sir, I should be sorry if you should be ever in such a state as to be able to do nothing more. Robertson said, Dr. Johnson, allow me to say that in one respect I have the advantage of you. When you were in Scotland, you would not come to hear any of our preachers, whereas when I am here, I attend your public worship without scruple, and indeed with great satisfaction. Maybe I should give this guy a Scottish accent, since he's, I guess, Scottish. Johnson said, "Why, sir, that is not so extraordinary. The King of Siam sent ambassadors to Louis XIV, but Louis XIV sent none to the King of Siam." Footnote says, there's a footnote here from Boswell that says, Mrs. Piozzi confidently mentions this as having passed in Scotland. So she was saying this conversation happened in Scotland, but when Johnson and Boswell were there, but Boswell's saying otherwise. He's saying it came later. Just had to rub it in Mrs. Piozzi's face. Here, my friend, for once discovered a want of knowledge or forgetfulness, for Louis XIV did send an embassy to the King of Siam, and the Abbe Chiozzi, who was employed in it, published an account of it in 2 volumes. Next day, Thursday, April 30th. I found Johnson at home by himself. Johnson said, "Well, Sir Ramsay gave us a splendid dinner. I love Ramsay. You will not find a man in whose conversation there is more instruction, more information, more elegance than Ramsay." I said, "What I admire in Ramsay is his continuing to be so young." Johnson said, "Why, yes, sir, it is to be admired. I value myself upon this, that there is nothing of the old man in my conversation. I am now 68, and I have no more of it than at 28. I said, "But, sir, would you not wish to know old age? He who is never an old man does not know the whole of human life, for old age is one of the divisions of it." Johnson said, "Nay, sir, what talk is this?" I said, "I mean, sir, the Sphinx description of it, morning, noon, and night. I would know night as well as morning and noon." Johnson said, "What, sir, would you know what it is to feel the evils of old age? Would you have the gout? Would you have decrepitude?" Seeing him heated, I would not argue any farther, but I was confident that I was in the right. I would, in due time, be a Nestor, an elder of the people, and there should be some difference between the conversation of 28 and 68. A grave picture should not be gay. There is a serene, solemn, placid old age. Johnson said, "Mrs. Thrale's mother said of me what flattered me much. A clergyman was complaining of want of society in the country where he lived, and said, 'They talk of runts,' that is, young cows. 'Sir,' said Mrs. Salisbury, 'Mr. Johnson would learn to talk of runts,' meaning that I was a man who would make the most of any situation, my situation, whatever it was. He added, 'I think myself a very polite man.'" On Saturday, May 2nd, I dined with Johnson at Sir Joshua Reynolds's, where there was a very large company and a great deal of conversation, but owing to some circumstance which I cannot now recollect, I have no record of any part of it, except that there were several people there by no means of the Johnsonian school, so that less attention was paid to him than usual, which put him out of humor. And upon some imaginary offense from me, he attacked me with such rudeness that I was vexed and angry, because it gave those persons an opportunity of enlarging upon his supposed ferocity and ill treatment of his best friends. I was so much hurt, and had my pride so much roused, that I kept away from him for a week, and perhaps might have kept away much longer, nay, gone to Scotland without seeing him again, had not we fortunately met and been reconciled. To such unhappy chances are human friendships liable. Well, that's it for today. Till next time, bye from Boswell.